tens of billions of dollars in economic activity. And that's damn important.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
Great 5G, ultimately that's going to morph into 6G.
5G, the fifth generation of wireless technology.
5G technology.
5G technology. 5G is the groundwork for the wireless industry, what they're calling the Internet of Things.
Beaming 5G at the Earth.
A system in which everything from your car to your dishwasher to your door lock to your baby's diapers will be connected to the Internet.
5G wireless technology is on the way.
If something can be connected, it will be connected in a 5G world.
Very important angle of 5G.
But don't take it from me. Take it from the man who used to head the Federal Communications Commission, the agency which is supposed to be in charge of regulating the wireless industry.
5G radiation. Wireless radiation.
If something can be connected, it will be connected in the 5G world. Autonomous vehicles, smart city energy grids, transportation networks, and water systems. Hundreds of billions of microchips. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country.
But this 5G revolution may have a dark side.
Biological and health
As it
effects.
turns out, wireless radiation has biological effects. Published, peer-reviewed science already shows that today's technology creates radio frequencies that pose a threat to both the human body and to animals, not to mention to the environment. What evidence do we have that the electromagnetic fields that we already are exposed to are harmful given our current levels of exposure?
Well, we have about 10,000 papers that have been published and many, many hundreds of reviews that have been published that clearly show that there are massive effects on our bodies based on the exposures we already have. 5G is designed to carry gigantic amounts of information, as you've already stated. And the way that information is carried is by pulsations. We know that the pulsations make these electromagnetic fields much, much more dangerous. And 5G, therefore, is designed to be vastly more dangerous than anything that we've been exposed to date.
This is one woman's experience of living on the top floor under cell antennas for 2 months.
It started with my daughter. She initially got a rash on her leg that was sort of unexplainable, and when she was trying to explain to me what it felt like, she kept saying it was kind of funny because it wasn't hurting inside or on the skin. She said it was hurting in the skin. And then a few days later she got another rash on her arm, and then another small kind of stranger rash, and it was the same thing. And then one day in the kitchen she was holding something and she dropped it because she said it felt like the blood in her hand went cold and in a wave along her hand to her fingertips, and then her hand stayed numb for about 15 minutes. Some more of the symptoms include a sort of hissing in my ear, in particular when I'm in my apartment, but for about 3 days, anywhere I went, it would just sort of come in. I kind of felt like an antenna, and I'd sort of kind of go like, trying to find the place where the hissing or the buzzing stopped. I've not slept in my apartment since last Saturday, so a week ago now, and the buzzing went away after about 3 days, and also the feeling of tingling all over my body slowly started to go away. But I have noticed that whenever I'm in other buildings now or anywhere close to, I don't even know what, because I was never sensitive before. I'm no Luddite. I have computers. I have all the stuff that most of us have, and I've never been sensitive at all. But now wherever I go, I'm feeling the same as I felt in my apartment, feeling dizzy and nauseous and a sort of a metallic taste in my mouth, headache and pressure on my head, and just feeling like I want to sort of faint or throw up. And that's wherever I go now. So I found myself becoming increasingly sensitive to my own, my own computer and my own cell phone in ways that I never was before.
Now, to play devil's advocate, one can say that, hey, if you don't want to be exposed, don't buy a cell phone. Don't buy a wireless router. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say you shouldn't do it. That's true. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have Wi-Fi in my house. I do everything wired to the extent that it possibly can be. So it's perfectly possible to do almost everything that you want to do in a wired configuration, which are much, much safer than the way we're doing things by and large. The problem is that in the U.S., the government funding for doing research in this area was cut off between 1986 and 1999. And since that time, the only thing the government has been doing is to push these technologies out. And there's absolutely no effort to determine what kinds of health effects are being created. Fortunately, there's a lot of very good evidence from studies that are going on elsewhere. But the U.S., and we take great pride in our science. And as an American scientist, I really hate to say this, but American science basically is nowhere in this area because there's simply no funding.
These existing health effects of wireless radiation are worthy of attention because in order for 5G to work efficiently, cell towers will need to be installed everywhere.
First of all, 5G doesn't travel well because of the nature of its frequency. So instead of big towers, as we have now, broadcasting these frequencies long distances, it won't do that. And it doesn't go through solid objects, what we call solid objects, very well either.
That's why over 200 doctors and scientists worldwide are now cautioning that we need research on the health effects of 5G before its rollout.
Because the human body, including the skin, is an antenna. It interacts with frequencies, and it receives and transmits information.
The new 5G wireless technology involves millimeter waves, which are extremely high frequencies, producing photons of much greater energy that we've already heard about than 4G, and allowing this technology to be used without providing its safety is reckless in the extreme, as the millimeter waves are known to have a profound effect on all parts of the human body.
This is the greatest environmental and safety threat of our time, and instead of fighting back and pushing back, especially when we have safe alternatives like wired fiber optic to the home, we are spending millions and billions and just showing the way to the industry of taking advantage of us. This is when we need our representatives to represent. This is when we need our representatives to push back. And it can't just be you, it has to be the entire council. This is truly wrong. You can only microwave radiate people so much. And what you'll see in my packet is a report from the Army on millimeter waves looking at 350 studies showing clear biological effects below thermal, below our safety guidelines. And what's interesting about this report is they said the subjects of these studies, 30 to 80% of them were aware of it because our skin and our eyes are going to absorb a disproportionate amount of this wireless radiation. So you're talking about serious effects to our skin and our nerves and venerate our skin, so you're talking about affecting our entire neurological system and exposing our eyes to military-grade wireless radiation, and our eyes have no natural defense against this. So you're talking about putting this in front of people's homes, forcing it into their rooms. This is absolutely absurd. We have video from the FCC proceedings with one of the 5G engineers saying themselves, look, we are forcing these directed beams into people's windows at levels that we do not allow in our labs, in our safety labs. This is absolutely absurd, and the FCC shrugged it off and said, this isn't an issue we need to be discussing today.
Okay, thank you.
But first, let's consider that the brain tumors, infertility, memory loss, nausea, neurological disorders, and anxiety may not even be the worst 5G has to offer. Because with 5G also comes the potential to turn every device into a way for the state to spy on you.
So everything must be monitored. This is the reason why you're having so-called smart technology. The Fitbits, the things that go on you, everything's got to be on it. You're just being teased with this stuff at the moment. You have to kind of understand where this is going to go. And that means you can't have privacy, okay? Privacy is gone, okay, according to these people, whoever these are, or they are. Now, isn't it interesting how things are just moving along at the same thing? Suddenly we're watching lots of programs about people being watched. Yeah, we're kind of warmed up to this. Loads of programs about kids being watched, adults being watched, whatever it is. And now and then Amazon Echo comes out, and suddenly, isn't it great? I'm not bothered about having a microphone in my house that's recording everything I say and is selling it on to third-party people. Can you imagine anyone here who's above a certain age, 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, anyone said, I'm going to put a microphone in your house, and you would have gone, you've got to be crazy. Okay, you talk to younger people today, no disrespect to anyone here that is more informed. Isn't it interesting that the head of Apple was really pushing these cars, this whole kind of car automotive technology, and you've got Uber, share your car. Airbnb, share your house. Isn't it interesting how these ideas are coming in? Autonomy requires privacy, and the psychological papers are very clear. You don't have privacy, you've got no autonomy. This way of framing the issue makes sense if you understand privacy solely as political or legal concept, and its political importance is certainly part of what makes privacy so important. What is private is what is yours alone to control, and without interference from others or the state. But the concept of privacy also matters for another deeper reason. It is intimately connected to what it is to be an autonomous person. The connection between loss of privacy and dehumanization is a well-known and ancient fact. You cannot be persuaded to give up your privacy. This technology is part of doing that.
5G is a weapon. It's used by the military. Do you know these 5G millimeter wave technologies are used to scatter crowds?
This was released by Muckrock, which is a kind of online magazine, and they gave a freedom of information request to one of the American fusion centers, which is a government center to do with security and terrorism. They put in a basic freedom request about something, reasonably innocuous, and they were sent by mistake documentation, and the documentation showed how towers and this technology was going to be used to control the population. Now, I very rarely will put stuff up like this unless I've got an official source, and this was official. It went all through the details of how you affect the human body, even to the point of putting voices in the head. Okay. Now, I've seen a demonstration of that done with music, which it can do. Now, this is just, I'm not going to go off on a tangent about it. They knew about that since in 1974, for crying out loud.
Do you know that the American military, they've admitted this. They have technology that fires frequencies at the enemy that basically breaks the enemy's spirit, so they give up and put their weapons down. This is the technology we're dealing with. Now, you take that into account, and then you think of 5G.
But they need information, they need data, and they need 5G to bring this about. Okay, so 5G isn't just about it's going to give you cancer and it's very dangerous. There's a whole other aspect to this.
We are electromagnetic, electrical organisms, transmitters and receivers of information. When our electromagnetic fields are in balance and harmony, we have health. We have psychological health and we have physical health. The reason that this technological society is causing so much psychological and quote, physical disease is because these frequencies, technologically driven, we live in this Wi-Fi world now and all the phone masts and all the rest of it, these technologically generated frequencies are scrambling the balance of the human electromagnetic electrical communication systems. And if you scramble them, you create a state of disharmony, dis-ease, which plays through to physical and mental, emotional, psychological dis-ease. The brain processes information electrically. It communicates with the cellular structure electrically. And it operates within a certain band of frequency. If you can broadcast frequencies carrying information, this technology has long been known, carrying information and perceptions within the frequency that the brain decodes information, the brain will decode those frequencies and will have those perceptions. You can externally, even without connection to AI, although that's the piece de la resistance, if you like, that's the kind of holy grail.
This is a time of rapid progress. when precision robotics, advancements in AI, and the capabilities of 5G can accelerate innovation, revolutionize logistics, and enhance our daily lives. When robotics, AI, and 5G work in unison, new possibilities emerge. This is the invention age.
Who understands that AI is a massive threat to your jobs? These are serious studies from serious academic schools, all predicted probably the next 10 years, 12 years, probably about half of you are going to lose your job to AI technology. Okay, and in some countries up to 60 to 80%. They need 5G to bring this technology on board. There are various people involved in this. I'm going to take you down a tangent. This is a guy, he's a professor, very well respected. He's the head of something called the Basic Income Earth Network, because if you're going to lose your job, you need to be paid, so you need a basic income. It sounds sounds great. So they're all pushing this. In fact, it's been pushed globally. He's also interested in linguistic justice. Now, what linguistic justice means, if you're English speaking, you need to pay a tax to someone who doesn't speak English, because they need to speak English in order to get on in the world. This is the kind of thinking of these people, okay? You're dealing with some very interesting characters. Other professors are involved in this, talking about we need this kind of stuff. Basic income, the pilots are everywhere in the world because they know you are going to lose your job, so they're going to have to give you a basic income. The problem is you become poorer on basic income. Also, I want to ask you a question. When the government says to you, I'm going to give you money, do you think that's going to be the end of it? Do you think you might be told where you can live and what you can do? Okay, and this is what you need to start thinking. There's a social side to this technology.
You can influence people's perceptions externally by broadcasting these frequencies that we interact with, because we are antenna. Some decades ago, there was a guy who worked out the frequencies of different emotional states. This is long ago. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated now. So every thought, every emotional response is a frequency. It generates a frequency, and it is of itself a frequency. Hate is a frequency, and it's different to love. You know, when you are in a room and there's lots of aggression and conflict and hatred, you feel it. What do people say? Oh God, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife in there. That is because the frequencies of hate and conflict have been so generated, they have changed the electromagnetic field of the room. The point being that they worked out the frequencies of various emotions, including rage and what have you. And basically, they can play across a community these frequencies without anyone knowing, and it starts to have an effect. And it starts to build rage, it starts to build anger. And people might not realize why they're feeling it, but they start to feel it. And then what they do is they trigger that with an event, maybe some guy is attacked by the police or something, or somebody's arrested for something they didn't commit, and now there's the trigger. The blue touch paper's been lit of this manufactured frequency-driven rage, and you have mass riots and what have you, and people do things that they wouldn't normally do.
This guy here, no disrespect to him, but I disagree with him. He obviously went to a conference, you can read it on the DVD later or whatever, where he was radicalized, because the language they're talking about, how do you decapitate the king? How do you bring down power? This is incredible. This is the Royal Society of Arts. And this guy is the head of the actual project in Scotland at the moment, testing this basic income in this country, or in Britain. And he says now hear this is the language. We now have the opportunity to move the basic income conversation forward and identify practical ways to run a pilot which works locally and has global resonance. That is a globalist language. If you know anything about Agenda 2020 and 2030 and all these sorts of things, basic income can't be another small response. Bearing in mind this is coming on the back of 5G and AI that's going to take your jobs. It should be radical, it should be world-changing, and it should be effective, and it's just a starting point. It's the beginning of a new social contract. So when 5G comes in, AI technology is going to come on board, you're going to lose your job, now you're going to be paid an income by the government, and it's the beginning of a new social contract. And he says we need to start talking about land ownership. And we need to start talking about how you tax. And really what this is, in my interpretation, is, anybody's got a different idea, but you may ask Ian later, is that means you won't own land, you won't own a house, you won't own a car. Okay? This is where they're pushing this. Equity of outcome means everybody has to have an equal outcome. Okay? You can't earn more than someone else, you can't have more energy than someone else, you're all going to live in the same size house. There's documents demonstrating this, don't have time to get into it. But so to be fair, you have to have equity. All these things have to be equal. The amount of children you have. If you look at how this ideology, and it is an ideology, has been used before in the history of this planet, that also goes down to what your beliefs are and what you can say. And I think you just said someone was just gagged wanting to speak about certain things. Also, ID 2020 is coming in, sponsored by the usual culprits, and effectively they're using this to give everybody an ID. That's what they want to do globally by 2020. I think they're a little bit behind. And they want to be able to monitor you from the cradle to the grave. And they want to make sure that you're doing everything they want you to do. So if they want you to take a drug, you will be monitored for it and measured. This is what this technology is really being ramped up for.
There are going to be boxes broadcasting 5G, this weapon, down every street, all over the world. You're talking phenomenal numbers of these boxes broadcasting, like on the lamp standard outside your children's bedroom and stuff, broadcasting this stuff. There's no way you'll be able to go where you won't be in a field of 5G.
Anyone like this guy? He's calling for universal basic income. He thinks he's got a church, and he's the head of it, no doubt. Here's another guy from the Basic Income Earth Network, just to show you how this social side is changing. We need to create this new connected culture. Everyone's going to be connected. We need to drive us to compete for social contribution. If you understand your history, you know what he's really talking about. To achieve that, many people will need to undergo training. So you haven't got a job, you got on basic income, and now they're going to train you as educators and community organisers to create and maintain a positive social climate. I recommend that a basic income will not come by itself, rather it will be coupled with socio-educational training. You need to understand something. 5G is one of the final nails in the coffin before AI comes in. And when AI comes in, people have heard me say this before, yes, there are good aspects of it, but the reality is I've looked at this in great detail, far more than I can go into today, and I do not see the human race surviving this down the line. I really do not, okay? And I'm sorry to put a downer on a Saturday night and tell you that, but you do need to understand, and I urge you to research and look at this for yourself.
With molecular and cellular biologists, with blood microscopists, with weapons development experts, frontline activists and researchers, and all the stories I'm hearing from these experts and pundits leads to the same thing. 5G is almost certainly the end game. It is an extinction event brought into our homes, into our classrooms, onto the high street, into the very cells and DNA in our human bodies. It is such a perilous threat that it is almost impossible to imagine, let alone describe. When the 5G signature goes live, it will tap into a multitude of satellites which are in geosat orbit around the surface of the Earth. Millions of surface antennas will pick up that signaling, and will then scatter the signaling into hundreds and hundreds of millions of different micro antenna systems set up on street lamps and even in your home, which you're not aware of incidentally. The LED light bulbs in your home invariably contain the micro or nanotech lens flare capacitors, which will receive the 5G signaling, and it will proliferate the 5G signaling everywhere by exploding the signal into billions of photons, which will target everything all at the same time. This is stealth technology. This is invisible science. But what it means, in simple terms, is that you will be flagged up, visible, trackable inside your own home. Anywhere you move on the surface of the Earth, they will have a lock and load tracking capability over you. You will be visible to invisible masters, each one of us, all the time. Today, our governments and the corporate sector have managed somehow to infiltrate the mainframe of our civilization and are pushing through a $20 trillion infrastructural rollout without any, and I mean without any, health science running behind it. There have been no tests. Your government and your health authorities are either in collusion on this matter of genocide and ecocide, or they're just damn stupid, and I would suggest it is the latter.